The night Adaeze walked into Omi-Osa village, 3 men tripped over themselves and 1 elder spilled her evening stew. She carried no luggage. No husband walked beside her. She simply appeared at the edge of the village as the sun dipped below the river, her wrapper the color of deep water, her eyes holding something that made even the oldest men forget what they were saying mid-sentence. Nobody knew where she came from. Nobody thought to ask, not at first. By the second morning, the whispers had already begun. A woman that beautiful does not arrive alone, old Mama Chidra told her neighbor over the fence. Something is following her. Mark my words. But Adaeze paid the whispers no attention. She found a small room near the market, she greeted everyone she passed, and she laughed at children's jokes with the kind of warmth that made you feel, just for a moment, that the world was a gentler place than it actually was. That was when the men started coming. First it was Chidi, the palm wine tapper, who brought her a fresh gourd and sat outside her door for 2 hours rehearsing what he would say. When she finally opened it, he forgot every word. He stammered. She smiled and told him kindly, "Thank you for the wine, Chidi. But I am not looking for a husband." He laughed nervously, convinced she was playing hard to get. He came back 3 more times. Each time, she said the same thing, her voice gentle but unmistakably final. Then came Son, who wore his finest agbada and told her she was wasting her beauty living alone. Adaeze looked at him for a moment, then said, "My beauty is not something I am wasting. It is simply mine." Son blinked. He had never heard a woman say something like that before. He left confused and, though he would not admit it, a little ashamed. Then came Whale, who tried poetry. Then a merchant from the east side of the village. Then 2 brothers who arrived together, apparently having made some private agreement about which one would speak first. Adaeze turned them all away with the same unshakable calm, never angry, never cruel, but never yielding either. Word spread to the palace. Prince Emeka heard about this woman who refused everyone, and being the kind of man who had never been refused anything in his life, he decided this was a problem that required his personal attention. He arrived at her door on a Tuesday afternoon with 2 attendants and a kola nut. "I am told you have been rejecting the men of this village," he said, not unkindly, but with the casual authority of someone who considered himself the natural solution to most problems. "I have been declining their proposals," Adaeze said. "There is a difference." The prince smiled, certain she simply did not yet understand who she was speaking to. "I am Emeka, son of the Obi. I know who you are," she said. "And my answer is the same as it has been for the others. Thank you for coming, Your Highness." Then she closed the door. The prince stood outside her door for a full minute, kola nut still in hand, before his attendants quietly guided him away. By that evening, the village had turned. The mood shifted in the way village moods do, not all at once, but like water finding cracks in a wall. Where people had once found Adaeze charming, they now found her suspicious. A woman who refused the prince. A woman who turned away every man with a smile and no explanation. She had to be hiding something. Maybe she was already married somewhere and was running from her husband. Maybe she was barren and did not want anyone to find out. Maybe she used juju to attract men and fed off their attention without giving anything in return. Nobody said these things to her face. But everyone said them to each other. Except for Ngozi. Ngozi had been the first person in Omi-Osa to befriend Adaeze. She had shared her cooking pot, walked with her to the market, introduced her to the other women. In those early weeks, she had been proud to call Adaeze her friend, proud of the warmth between them and proud, privately, of being close to someone so striking. But something had slowly cuddled inside Ngozi, growing in the quiet hours when she was alone and honest with herself. Before Adaeze arrived, Ngozi had been the one men noticed. She had been the one women wanted to sit beside. She had been, without ever saying so aloud, the most admired woman in Omi-Osa. And now she was invisible. She watched Chidi, who had once brought her mangoes, trip over himself for a woman who did not even want him. She watched the village men talk about Adaeze as though the rest of the world had gone blurry. She watched and watched until what had started as mild irritation became something darker, heavier, and altogether more dangerous. One evening, she found Chidi and Son and Whale sitting together near the riverbank, passing a gourd between them and wearing the particular expression of men whose pride had been bruised in the same place. Ngozi sat down without being invited. For a while, nobody spoke. Then she said, quietly, "She thinks she is better than all of us." Chidi grunted. Whale stared at the water. Son said, "There is something wrong with that woman. No normal person refuses everyone." No normal person, Ngozi agreed. She let the word sit in the air between them like smoke. Then she said, "What if we gave her something to humble her? Something to remind her that she is not so special after all?" The three men looked at her. "I know someone," Ngozi continued, her voice dropping lower, "who can prepare something. Not to harm her. Just to make her stumble. To show the village who she really is." There was a long silence. The river moved below them, dark and quiet, as if listening. And one by one, without speaking, the three men nodded. 3 days later, the village gathered for the monthly harvest celebration. There was music, there was food, and there was palm wine flowing freely from clay pots set at every corner of the square. Adaeze came because she had been invited and because she was not the kind of woman who hid in her room to avoid people who disliked her. She wore white that evening, a simple wrapper tied high, and she sat with Elder Nechi near the edge of the crowd, laughing softly at something the old woman had said. Ngozi moved through the celebration with a cup in her hand and a smile on her face. She reached Adaeze and crouched beside her. "I brought you something," she said warmly. "Palm wine, freshly tapped. You have been sitting here with nothing to drink." Adaeze looked at her. Something passed across her face, not suspicion exactly, but a quiet flicker, like a candle responding to a distant wind. Then she accepted the cup. Elder Nkechi watched this exchange without blinking. Adaeze raised the cup and drank. For a moment, nothing happened. Then she set the cup down very slowly, the way a person sets something down when their hands have stopped obeying them. Her breathing changed. Her eyes, which had always held that deep, unreadable stillness, began to close. Adaeze, Elder Nkechi reached for her arm. But Adaeze was already falling. She collapsed sideways and the crowd froze. Someone screamed. People scrambled backward, knocking over food and stools, and then the ground began to shake, not violently, not like an earthquake, but with a deep, rhythmic trembling, like the heartbeat of something enormous buried beneath the earth. Then the light came. It erupted from Adaeze's body the way dawn erupts over a river, sudden and total and impossible to look at directly. People shielded their eyes. Children pressed their faces into their mothers' wrappers. Chidi stumbled backward into Whale. Ngozi stood perfectly still, her smile gone, her cup still in her hand, unable to move. When the light faded, Adaeze was gone. In her place stood something that wore her shape but was no longer her, taller, impossibly still, the air around her moving like water moves around a stone in a current. Her voice, when she spoke, came from everywhere at once. "People of Omi-Osa," she said. "I gave you a chance you did not know you were being given." Nobody breathed. "Long before any of you were born," she continued, "a woman named Obiageli lived in this village. She was gentle and she was good, and she refused the powerful man who believed her refusal was an insult. So the people of this village took her to the river. They called her a witch. They cast her in. The goddess of this river pulled her body from the water and wept. And she said, 'If your children ever do this again, I will remember.' The silence in the square was absolute. 'I came as a test,' the spirit said. Her eyes moved slowly across the crowd and people looked away when they met her gaze. 'I came to see if Omi-Osa had changed. I came as a woman who asked for nothing and harmed no one. And tonight, the descendants of the very people who drowned Obiageli poisoned my cup.' Ngozi's cup hit the ground. Chidi. Son. Well. The spirit spoke their names and each man flinched as though struck. And Ngozi, who called herself my friend. The crowd turned. The four of them stood together, and the space around them widened as people stepped away, quietly, instinctively, as though proximity itself had become dangerous. The spirit raised her head, and when she spoke again, the river behind the village rose audibly, a rushing sound filling the night air. Omi-Osa will know grief until the descendants of those who wronged Obiageli return what they borrowed. The land will give nothing. The river will offer nothing. The roads that lead here will feel long to those coming and longer still to those trying to leave. Then the light returned, briefly, blindingly, and she was gone. The crops began to fail within a week. The river, which had always run wide and generous along the village's eastern edge, grew shallow and grey. Fishermen came back with empty nets and said nothing because there was nothing to say. A sickness settled over the village like a second skin, not deadly all at once, but persistent, wearing, the kind that makes ordinary life feel like climbing a hill that never ends. Traders from neighboring villages stopped coming. The road in both directions seemed to grow longer, heavier, as though the ground itself was reluctant. And through all of it, Ngozi, Chidi, Son, and Well lived as ghosts among their own people. No one ate with them. No one greeted them in the morning. Children who had once played at their feet crossed to the other side of the path when they saw them coming. They had food because they could still find it, but food eaten alone in silence tastes like nothing. They had shelter, but shelter without warmth is just walls. It was Ngozi who broke first. Not with tears, she had gone past tears. She sat at the river's edge one night, watching the grey, low water, and she felt the full weight of what she had done settle into her bones like cold. She had not hated Adaeze, not really. She had hated herself and found it easier to aim that hatred somewhere outside. And a woman was gone now. A woman who had never once harmed her. Chidi found her there. Then Son. Then Well. They sat in a row along the bank and no one said anything for a long time. Then Ngozi stood up. She did not make a speech. She did not ask for forgiveness out loud because she understood, in the quiet certainty that suffering sometimes produces, that forgiveness was not hers to ask for, it belonged to Obiageli, and Obiageli was beyond asking. What she could give was what the spirit had said. A return. She waded in. The water was cold and still. She walked until it reached her waist, then her chest, then she was gone. Chidi went next, without hesitation. Then Son. Then Well. The river did not rage. It did not swallow them dramatically. It simply received them, the way rivers receive everything eventually, with patience and without ceremony. Before dawn, the rain came. It came gently at first, then full and heavy and generous, the kind of rain that makes the earth exhale. By morning the river had color again, running clear and fast along its banks. Within days the first green shoots broke through the soil in the farming plots. The sickness eased. A trader from the neighboring village appeared on the road, and then another, and then the road felt like a road again. Omi-Osa breathed. But it was not the same village. It was quieter, more careful, as though it had swallowed a lesson that it could still feel in its chest. Elder Nkechi gathered the people, and she did not speak about punishment or justice or the power of the river goddess. She spoke about Obiageli. About a woman who had said no and been thrown into a river for it. About Adaeze, who had said no and been poisoned for it. About how the distance between those two moments was supposed to have been growth, and how the village had walked in a circle instead. We will teach this story, she said, her voice steady and unhurried, to every child born in this village from now on till the river stops running. Not as a warning. As a remembrance. Because a woman's no is not a challenge. It is not a puzzle to be solved or a door to be forced. It is a complete and finished sentence. And it deserves to be heard as one. The village was silent. The river ran behind them, clear and bright under the early morning sun, carrying everything downstream the way it always had, the fallen leaves, the silt, the weight of what Omi-Osa had done and what it had lost and what it had, at great cost, finally learned. And if you listened carefully, standing at the bank in the early hours before the village woke, you could sometimes hear something beneath the current, not quite a voice, not quite silence. Something that sounded, if you were patient enough to wait for it, like a woman at peace. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling me which moment hit you the hardest, and if you want more stories like this one, subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss the next one. The river has more to say.